The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, I have a guest from the conspiracy community who goes about delivering the message a bit differently. Through her Orwell-inspired writing style, she has found a way to bring up some of today's hard conversations, with satire along the way, of course. But before we get into this fascinating conversation today, just a couple of quick news and updates. First and foremost, for anybody that hasn't caught it on every single show for the past month or two now, the t-shirt giveaway is still going on. That's going to be going on until we reach 50 entries. The reason being is that I'm trying to get some opinions to help the show grow, to kind of break this glass ceiling that we've been at for a while. So any of your guys' opinions are greatly appreciated and definitely go a long way. But if you guys are interested in winning any t-shirt of your choice off of the Open Minds Media merch store, all you guys have to do is go and fill out a 10-question survey. That link is available down in the show description so you guys can find it quick and easy. And as I said, all of your opinions are greatly appreciated. And if you guys don't mind just taking a couple minutes to give your opinions, if you guys have been a long-time listener, it would definitely mean the world to me. And for anybody that's been catching Bizarre Inquiries Live, you guys can catch the next episode of that on August 7th at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over there on the Open Minds Media YouTube channel. And if anybody has any questions, clips, or articles that they would like to submit for that, make sure you guys get those to me before that next show through social media, through email, or through any ways that you guys can get a hold of me. And if you guys really enjoy that show, don't forget to check out my other show, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin, talking about a lot of the same topics that we talk about on this show, with a little goofing around along the way, and of course a lot more deep dives instead of interview style. But if you guys enjoyed this show, I definitely think you guys will enjoy that show too if you guys aren't already checking it out. And just one last thing before we get into the show, if anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their experiences or encounters, or contacting me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can call or text me on the Open Minds Media hotline. That number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys happen to miss that, it is available down in the show notes. And every single thing that I mention and will mention throughout the show is all available on the link tree, which is also available down in those show notes. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show, author P.R Infidel. How's it going today?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. You're one of the people that have actually hit me up to come on the show. So I always get really excited when people end up shooting me a message to come on the show, because it usually means that they're semi-familiar with the format, what we like to talk about over here. So I'm really looking forward to what we end up getting into today.
Yeah, no, this will be great. It's always awesome to meet up with like-minded individuals because, I feel like the media tries to drown us, at least the mainstream media. And so it can be it can be very hard at times to find your tribe.
Ain't that the truth? But the good news is at least we have the internet, and it's a blessing and a curse at the same time that, it kind of makes the world smaller and makes it so it feels like everybody's more lonely because you don't have that in-person connection as much. But on the flip side, if you're a very unique individual, you can find your tribe a lot easier on the internet than you can with, if things were how they were before the internet age. So, like I said, blessing and a curse all at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I like that. I like to look at it like that too.
So I guess a good spot to start before we get too far into the heavy conversation, for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what you do exactly, and what exactly you write about, why don't you let them know a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do?
All right. Well, my name is P.R Infidel, or Patricia Ray, as you like. I am an author, and my journey actually started a really long time ago when I was deployed in Iraq. I went over there in 2003, so I'm dating myself, but I don't care. Gen X all the way. It's okay. So I was over there, and basically what I saw didn't square with what my government told me about Islam. Okay. And so I kind of started down this rabbit hole, started researching it, and I found out I'd been lied to about it. And I said, well, my goodness, if they've lied to me about this, I mean, what else have they lied to me about? And I just kind of started going down different rabbit holes, looking at different topics. And when COVID happened, I mean, I really, I really put my foil hat on. And, I put it on with pride. In fact, on another podcast host show, I actually wore a tinfoil bow. So I'm very much into it. And then also during COVID, I started writing. And my first book was Tales of American Idiocy. If you've ever read George Orwell's work, that's pretty much the closest thing I can compare it to, like George Orwell's Animal Farm, because there's a lot of little animal stories in it that highlight different issues that were going on in the early 2020s and that are still going on to this day. So that was my first work. And in that book, there was a story about a cat named Chester, who was a conspiracy theorist cat. And I got a lot of fans off of Chester.
Kind of fitting being a cat, too, because I feel like the cats are the ones that are aware and kind of watch everybody. Like, same as kind of Animal Farm like you're doing, trying to fit the persona of the archetype with the animal, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was thinking I wanted to do something with a conspiracy theorist, but I wanted it to be an animal. And I was like, well, let's see. Should I make it a dog? Maybe a turtle? No, you know what? I'm going to make it a cat. And of course, he was the main theorist, and he ends up converting the other pets. And so that story just really touched a lot of people. And I started getting requests for more Chester. We want more Chester. We want more Chester. So I said, okay, well, let me write another book about Chester. And so I ended up writing Conspiracy Crew, The End is Meow. And that's about the animals as they go on this adventure to Canada to help the trucker brigade. I don't know if you're familiar with that event.
No, of course. Yeah, I'm in Michigan, so I was like right next to where all that stuff's going down.
Oh, okay. So you know all about that. Okay. So basically what happens in Conspiracy Crew, The End is Meow, is that the animals take it a step further and they release all these little cat videos, right? Like everybody loves cat videos, and they put them on the internet, and the cat videos are filled with subliminal messages to inspire the humans into rebellion. Okay. And one of the things that happens as a result of these subliminal messaging is the trucker blockade. So, of course, there were a lot of different blockades around. There was the one in Ottawa, and then there was the Coots. And what ends up happening with Chester and his, animal crew, the pets that he's converted to being foil hatters, is they go up there and they help the truckers out. And they essentially put a stall on the establishment of the New World Order and digital currency and some of these other things that some of these evil people had in mind for us.
I was going to say, I definitely like the idea that you kind of incorporated trying to get these messages in through also fictional stories. Because this is something that I talk about on the show all the time, is that half the time, the hardest part about trying to tell people some of this information is the manner in which you present it. And it seems like there's a lot of people that are able to do it through comedy, which definitely works because you can kind of make a joke and then kind of relate it around and connect it to where people can make sense of it. Another way that I haven't actually seen a lot of people do, as of it recently at least, it seems like in the past there was a lot of authors that would write about stuff more metaphorically than anything, but seeing somebody kind of bring that back and as a modern day way of being able to interpret some of these events, and also making people aware of some of this stuff that may have just been looking for a good fictional story, of course. I really appreciate the way you do it because, like I said, it's a matter of how to portray the message half the time. And sometimes you just need like a little fictional story that kind of has these truths laid within it to finally start waking somebody up to what's really going on in the world.
I agree with you. When I started basically my journey into questioning everything, I actually worked with a research group that did research on Islam, and they were writing these papers and these articles and these very kind of scholarly works kind of broken down, but it just wasn't resonating. And I said, you know what? I'm not a bad scholarly writer. I'm not a bad researcher, but I think I could be better through a storytelling medium, through, doing something like Scheherazade did, where she tried to save her people through storytelling. So that's kind of what I'm doing. That's why I'm dressed like this. I know it's a little weird. I know it's a little eccentric, but that's my message. And that's what I'm trying to do. I don't know if I'll be successful, but at least I can try.
Hey, you got to start somewhere. And I mean, kind of bringing it back a little bit earlier, I always like to kind of spot like a little bit as far as like when people are in the military. So as far as like when you were overseas, I always like to kind of hear about people's experiences and stories that either one, got them into conspiracies, or two, maybe just some bizarre experiences that they went through when they were over there, be it creature sightings or just fascinating stories. So to kind of lay a little bit of the groundwork on like who you are and why exactly you write about the stuff you do, I'd like to kind of hear about some of your experiences when you were in Iraq.
So I was over there during the invasion. Okay, so the first few months, and it was very weird because it was a real hurry up and wait scenario. For the first month that I was over there, we just stayed in Kuwait, just waiting for our time to go in. I was actually with a medical company, and we went up to Balad, which is about 30 miles north of Baghdad. And, I had a lot of interaction with the locals. But what I found very, very interesting is that you didn't see any women around. You would see kids, and they were always boys. You would see men. You just would never see the women out and about. And I thought that was very interesting. And I didn't understand that until I started actually studying like Sharia law and some of these things when I got back home. But, I'm not a war hero. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I didn't, save a bunch of people or do anything like that. I just did a real basic job. But it really stayed with me. Not necessarily what I did, but the feeling of the place. It's a very weird kind of spiritual feeling over there that I can't place or describe to you. I wish I could. And I feel bad saying that as a writer, but there's just something about it. It's like, something's there, but you can't see it. You can only feel it. And it's like the sadness. It's like a sadness all around you, and you can't quite put your finger on it.
I mean, not to mention just how much seems to be going on over there since the beginning of time. I mean, going back into some of the ancient biblical stories, all the sightings that people have of giants, all the supposed jinn sightings and everything that people experience over there. Like, there's just so much area that's so hard to be able to go in and explore and actually check out, on top of the fact of you don't know who's in the area, what their intentions are in the area. Like, there's just so much mystery over there that everybody thinks we have this entire world mapped out. But I mean, think about how many people have been able to just disappear into the mountains in the middle of the Middle East and be never seen again. Like, there's such an old presence to that area that I've never been over there myself, but everybody I've talked to that's been over there just says you feel this heaviness from over there, on top of the fact that you can just feel this like spiritual like element, like that it's a place that exists that no other place quite exactly feels like, because it just feels like it's a closer connection to like the spiritual world more so than like anywhere else, or that's at least how it's been kind of explained to me, at least. There's
an oppression over there. It's almost like an oppressive feeling. And it's just very deeply sad. And what you were talking about with the Nephilim and some of these things that are probably over there, you're probably right. But at the same time, it would be hard to excavate them. And a lot of it's probably been destroyed too, because in Islam, they have this principle called Jahiliyyah. And Jahiliyyah means basically the time of ignorance, that basically anything prior to Muhammad's revelation is considered corrupted, and some of the more devout Muslims will actually try to destroy it. There were these beautiful statues. I want to say they were in Afghanistan, or I forget the exact area, but they were kind of bordering on, the Eastern area versus the Middle Eastern. They were called I think, the Bamyan Buddhas. Huge, beautiful Buddha statues, and they destroyed them because it was considered Jahiliyyah. So, how much has been lost to Jahiliyyah, how much of it is just buried by the sand, we don't know. But yeah, there is a feeling unlike any other over there. And it's just, there's something there that you can't see because the limitations of the human eyes and the limitations of human ability, but it is there. And it really turns you on to things that, endless possibilities of what could be out there. I'm Catholic, so I would call it maybe there's some spiritual warfare. I don't know. Other Christians might consider that too. But yeah, that is the best way I can describe it. And even those words don't really do it justice.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. But in the meantime, don't forget to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook for show updates and the weekly live schedules. And don't forget to check out Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok, and tap that bell icon while you're there to get notified anytime we happen to go live. And if you'd like to join the discussion with like-minded individuals, become a member of the OMM Discord community today. All of those links are available off the link tree in the show description. And now back to the show. So just out of curiosity, from your experiences being there, I know a lot of people have kind of thrown some conspiracy theories as far as like what the involvement really is in like the Middle East. And some of what people have thrown as far as those conspiracy theories go are these like stargates or these portals or these particular like Nephilim bodies and all this type of stuff they're looking for. Just out of curiosity, did you hear any of these stories or anything like that from the inside, or did you get any feelings from the inside that they may have been looking for something like that and it wasn't on the books? I guess we all know it wasn't on the books as far as what we were looking for over there, but like, did you get any personal vibes or any type of anything as far as like this type of stuff going on over there?
No, if that sort of thing was happening, it was way above my pay grade. I will tell you that. I put nothing past these people. I put all possibilities on the table. Could they have been looking for something? Could they have found something? I don't know. Could they have been using a war as a cover to look for things and carry something really big out that normally people would have noticed, except for the war, possibly? Everything's on the table. I don't put anything past them. Not a darn thing.
And as far as, I guess, some of your interactions with some of the locals around there that kind of made you want to kind of start diving into Islam and really be able to understand it, what kind of like inspired that in particular? Was it like a certain person that you talked to, or was it just the energy as a whole from the area, like you were kind of explaining, and then you just wanted to try to personally understand it yourself?
The energy was a big thing. That was number one. Number two is that a lot of the things I saw, a lot of the ways they treated each other, there was a lot of lying that went on. And I thought that was very interesting. And I said, this doesn't happen where I come from. Somebody might lie to someone about looking fat in a dress, but they were just habitually lying about everything. And I thought that was very interesting. And then I came back and I learned about Tekya, and that that actually is a practice. It's considered basically religious lying. So in Christianity and Judaism, it's like you don't lie, right? That's against the 10 Commandments. They actually have a principle where you can lie to unbelievers and it's okay. It's called tekya. So I learned that when I got back, and I said, okay, that explains a lot. And then the no women, I thought that was really interesting. So of course I dove into that, and it's a whole rabbit hole. The best advice I can give anyone for wanting to understand it is go and read their books. That is the best way to understand it. You're not going to get an accurate representation off the media. And a lot of the textbooks we have, I hate to say that they use for high school and things like that, have been corrupted in this country because there's a lot of money coming from Saudi Arabia to put things in them that are not accurate. I used to follow money trails when I worked for the research group, and there's quite a lot of them coming into this country, I'm sorry to say.
So I know that we were going to originally get into conspiracies based around the book, but I'm definitely on a totally different avenue as far as trying to research this stuff a bit. So obviously coming from like the American perspective on, what exactly is going on in the Middle East and the whole like religious component to it. Obviously there's a lot of like mind manipulation, like you were kind of mentioning, and propaganda as far as like what we're being fed versus like what's actually going on over there. So obviously besides like the women aspect of it and some of these other things about being able to lie to people that are non-believers and stuff, what are some other components that you'd like to kind of set the record straight on, or some other cultural differences that we've been taught that may not be exactly as we've been taught? Because I'm kind of fascinated with this just because I haven't really had anybody on the show who's really personally dived into Islam. So I'm trying to kind of break this apart, take advantage of the opportunity to give the listeners a new perspective on something different.
Okay, so are you wanting to know like a good place to start, or is there some like one other thing you want me to pick that we haven't talked about that you think is important? I guess just rephrase that question again.
Kind of wherever you might want to touch base on it. Either some key differences that you want to kind of be able to set the record straight on, or some main components of propaganda that we've been fed that you'd like to set the record straight on.
Okay. So I guess if I were to pick one thing, it's a huge rabbit hole. Okay. But if I were to pick one thing to try to help your listeners, I don't think it's the same God as the Judeo-Christian God. And the reason why, there's so many reasons why, but basically the symptoms just don't match that diagnosis. They just don't. Allah is called a deceiver and the chief of deceivers, whereas the Judeo-Christian God condemns lying. Allah hates and is prevented by the presence of a dog. In Judeo-Christian culture, dogs are valued. In fact, Muhammad slaughtered quite a few dogs after an incident in which an angel was prevented. Well, he thought it was an angel, was prevented from visiting him by the presence of a dog. And then after that, that inspired the dog genocide. You can read about it. I don't think it's in the Quran. I think it's actually a hadith. I think it's in the Sunnah, which is a biography of Muhammad. And then it's not just the Quran. There's actually 3 books. So if you want to deep dive, you can deep dive into those. I can send you some links if you're interested for some books that break it apart fairly nicely. But yeah, I don't think it's the same God. I can't prove it. But just from everything I've studied and everything I've read, going all the way back to the origin of this stuff, it doesn't behave like the Judeo-Christian God. It doesn't make the same demands as the Judeo-Christian God. It doesn't value life in the same way that the Judeo-Christian God does. It just doesn't.
So
not from what I've read.
Kind of get into somewhat of like a religious conspiracy. I know there's a lot of people that like to try to debate the whole like New Testament versus the Old Testament concept, that it was actually 2 different gods that are being referred to versus the Old Testament and the New Testament God. And obviously when most people talk about Christianity, they kind of talk about this more forgiving, loving New Testament type God. But when you start diving into the Old Testament God, you realize that he would get angry at a lot of things. He would just wipe people out. He would tell people to sacrifice themselves for particular things. It almost kind of seems like, this might possibly fit the persona that maybe what they might be talking to or referring to is this Old Testament God. And just to kind of make this whole concept even weirder, I had somebody else recently come on the show, and they were talking about like the Jewish God, and the person that they refer to as God being, what was it, the demiurge or something like that, or had like some other totally different name, or it's like this duality being rather than like the God that we're referring to. And even going into like Freemasonry, they talk about this idea about, praying or giving an oath to like one particular God, but it doesn't necessarily clarify which particular God. And I actually had a listener that recently sent me an email, and he was kind of breaking down this aspect from the Freemason perspective. And he was basically saying that with that wording in particular, it's more so referring to like the archetype of whatever this creator being is, rather than saying like specifically this God or this God. It's more so referring to like the archetype itself. So it's kind of more based where multiple religions can kind of come into this idea. But the whole idea about there's everybody thinking that we're talking about the same God, but you kind of start diving into it, and it seems like we are talking about multiple different gods. And then you start diving into other religions that have multiple gods, and they start kind of fitting this context of like the fallen angels and the ones that were giving knowledge and everything. And the more I hear, it just kind of goes into this whole perspective of a lot of these religions, I think, are talking about a lot of the same events, but they're just talking about things from singular human perspectives, and they're not really getting the full component. It's like trying to understand what the entire image is of a puzzle with only a couple pieces of it. Like, you need all the pieces to put it together, and with no couple just single pieces are you ever going to be able to understand that full image.
Yeah. So, I've heard that argument before. That was actually considered a heresy. I can understand how someone would think that, though, that the Old and the New Testament God were different. I think the reason that Old Testament God was so angry is because the world at that time was very brutal. You've got to understand the Phoenicians, one of their favorite things to do in order to worship Baal was to take their firstborn child and put it in the hands of this burning bronze statue and essentially sacrifice it and kill it. And there was then a massive orgy that would take place afterwards. And that's only part of what was happening in the ancient world. He seems very brutal through our eyes, but, there's only so much evil this world can take. And eventually you do have to deal with evil. And I think that's what he was trying to do. So that's just from my perspective. But yes, I agree with you that it's interesting that some of these other religions have captured, snapshots of Judeo-Christianity. There's actually a section, I think it's a sect of, I think it's Hinduism, that believes that Jesus is the same as Vishnu. That's one of his incarnations. And then the Buddhists, there's also a sect of Buddhism that says that Jesus came over when he was in his teens and taught over there, and that he was actually a Buddha. So it's interesting how all these things kind of fit together and relate. But my theory, and of course you can take this for what you want, is that Allah is not the same as the Judeo-Christian God. I don't know for sure, but I think it's a demon, just from what I've studied. So we'll see.
I mean, that would definitely make sense in the aspect of when people have all these giant stories, for example, all these main sightings, the jinn sightings, all that stuff is coming from over in that area. So if there is something that's watching over that area that is protecting these things, it would definitely make sense why there's so many sightings of these things over there. I mean, like you were kind of mentioning, it just kind of has this dark presence over the area. And by no means, I mean, I know that even Christians, have fallen guilty to this, but in my opinion, I mean, I don't think that it's a positive thing for any religion to say that it's okay to kill anybody, regardless of if your religion states they're below you, they're above you, whatever. Like, I don't feel like any religion should result in death. Otherwise, that kind of defeats the purpose of what the foundation of the religion was in the first place, was to instill these moral values in people people so that they didn't want to kill and hurt each other. Like, it,
Right.
by no means, you know. Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to that deep conversation you crave. But I guess also kind of verifying maybe something else that you might have a little bit more knowledge on than I do. You know, everybody in the U.S., of course, has heard this whole idea about, you know, you get 72 virgins, you get 72 virgins. Do you by chance know where the root of this understanding might come from? Because I've always been told that that's not written or said anywhere, but I've never actually personally looked into it myself. So if you have some more information on this, I'd like to kind of set the record straight on that concept a bit too.
So, yeah, there are references to getting virgins, and then they're also called horis, which are like these spirits that are they have a weird kind of description. They're like these clear glass entities, and of course they're female, and they're very sexual in nature. They're not quite women, but they're female like.
Kind of like almost like succubus or like incubus, but like a different variation or something. Like, it almost kind of sounds like it's in the same like vein as that. Like, it seems like something that would take your energy by interacting with it.
Yeah. You could say it's a variation of that, but it's more of a type of thing that happens in the afterlife for them, supposedly. Another really interesting thing is that Christian women go to the afterlife, and Jewish women too, but so that they can be sex slaves for dead jihadists. So that's very interesting. So
I've never heard that one before. That's a really interesting thing to hear.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then a Muslim woman, when she dies, she gets one husband with a penis that never bends. So it's an extremely sex-focused afterlife.
What is that never bends? What does that mean exactly?
I don't know. I guess he's always hard. I don't
like it. That's what I assume. Like, it always works. Like, it doesn't break or something. Like, that's kind of a weird description, you know.
I mean, to me, there's so much better. There's so much better and much more to life. Okay, I can't talk here for a second. There's so much more to life than sex. I mean, when I go to heaven, I want to do a lot more than that. But that's just me. I mean, I guess to each his own.
Repressed cultures. I mean, I think that's kind of what it ends up coming out in. Is it seems like just about anybody that's repressed, it seems to come out in the aspect of like sexual urges for whatever reason. I think it's because it's like the most reptilian primal part of your brain. But, you know, any society that is completely repressed, it appears that there's these weird taboo aspects of sexuality that start to appear. And I'm assuming it's no different with the Middle East. The reason why it's so caught up in sex is because they've kind of repressed that as being a main focal point. Same with like Japanese culture. Like, that's another one that every piece of their folklore involves something in, you know, with sucking your soul out of your butt or somebody entering your butt or something like that, because there's such like a formal culture that gets like repressed. So it comes out in every other facet, you know, or through their folklore, through the religion.
Oh, that's amazing. I've never heard that. I'll have to look into that. But
oh yeah, the kappa. That's a really interesting one. You can keep it away with a cucumber, but if it sneaks up on you, it's going to pull your soul out of your butthole. That's no joke. The origin of the kappas from Japanese folklore.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that. That sounds amazing. That's my new little research project there. Thank you for that. Nice. I love it. Well, you want to talk foil hat stuff? I think we've done enough Islam.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like I said, it's an opportunity. We don't get to set the record straight on some of this stuff. So I'm glad I was at least able to ask you a few questions about it. But as far as conspiracy stuff, I mean, wherever you want to kind of happen to go with it. I know that with your book, you mentioned the trucker stuff that was going on in Canada. I don't know if there's any other ones you kind of want to bring up with and get into that gets brought up in the book, but wherever you want to go with it.
So the weather manipulation gets talked about in the book, as does the climate change stuff. That kind of comes in toward the end. The animals, of course, they go, I mean, there's spoilers here, but that's okay. The animals go to Canada. They help the truckers. They're successful. And there is a little bit of like a foreshadowing kind of in the middle of the novel where the team that's not in Canada, the White Hats, because there's a lizard and a turtle that stay behind and they're on the computers and they're doing White Hat stuff for them, okay, directing the field team. So they go into this barn because they hear about something going on in this barn, and they find a weather machine there. They find an actual thing that can shoot lasers. And basically what they do is they turn it on and it just shoots out this laser that melts this huge embankment of snow, because of course it's January and it's cold outside. And they find that it's actually meant to be mounted to the bottom of a plane. So they figure out that whoever's wanting to manipulate the weather is going to put these things on the planes. And so that gets into the weather mod. And towards the end of the novel, they actually talk about that, and that the next book is going to deal with them going to Hawaii during the Lahaina fires.
See, that's one of those ones that I feel like it lives in infamy, that everybody, when they hear chemtrails or anything like that, they just instantly want to say that it's complete conspiracy. But it's one of those ones that's been slowly like trickle fed in, where anytime anybody brings this up, I got to bring up, in the news constantly, they're talking about geoengineering. They're constantly talking about, oh, we're trying to do it as like a positive spin. Like they got to try to manipulate they got to manipulate the concept of like what you actually think is happening with this stuff. Because of course, with a lot of the conspiracy stuff, you start diving into the whole idea about like drugging the population, for example. You start looking into like the Quaaludes that they were spraying all over everybody in South Africa, and what the possible intentions of what they're actually spraying are. Because as far as I'm concerned, I mean, they're using the whole geoengineering facade, which I definitely think they have a key in. But on top of that, I think there are secondary aspects to what they're doing, and it also probably varies depending on the area. But I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things that if you really know what you're looking at, then it's pretty undeniable. Like when you're trying to explain this concept to somebody and you're pointing out a chemtrail, they're like, oh yeah, every single plane does that. But once in a while, you get that lucky opportunity where you'll see a plane that'll be flying, it'll be doing a trail, it'll stop, and then it'll start the trail back up in another spot. And then somewhere else in the sky, you'll see a plane where right behind it, it's starting to dissipate as it's flying. And it's like, all right, there's a contrail, there's a chemtrail. Pretty undeniable once you know what you're looking for.
Right. Well, they've been doing this for years. There was actually this thing during the Vietnam War called Operation Popeye. And it talks about that in my book. There's one of the pets is actually a reincarnated war dog. And he served both in Vietnam and in the Iraq War. And he's talking about Operation Popeye toward the end and how it's not crazy that they would manipulate the weather because they've done it before. Are you familiar with Operation Popeye?
I am familiar, but for the listeners that aren't, if you want to fill them in with as much as you can, I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
So basically, toward the end of the Vietnam War, the U.S. was losing. And so they devised a plan to flood this critical supply trail for the communists. It was called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And they cloud seeded and extended Vietnam's monsoon season by 5 months. Of course, it didn't win the war, but a 5-month extension of the monsoon season is nothing to sneeze at. So they were able to do this in the late 60s, early 70s. I forget the exact year Operation Popeye was. But if they could do that sort of thing then, what can they do now? Probably quite a bit more. I'm sure they could do almost anything.
So I don't know what area you live in exactly, but it seems like, at least in Michigan, we've kind of had this thing where the last few seasons, everything's kind of been flipping a bit, where, we haven't really had the same type of winters as we used to. We've barely really had snow in Michigan. We've also had these like crazy hot, humid summers. But one thing that I've noticed right before these weird weather events is the fact that they'll do some like heavy spraying to the point where it'll start off as one little thin strip. It'll start spreading out, and they'll have line by line, and it'll get to the point where it almost looks like it's checkerboards. And then the next day, it's like so overly hot, it's ridiculous. So I'll say if people are paying attention, it's pretty undeniable, but it seems like for whatever reason recently, there's this like hardcore kick up. And I'm sure that there's two ways you can spin it. It's either one, people are going to say, oh, it's climate change and they're just trying to correct it. Or on the flip side, they're trying to do this whole thing talking about like carbon tax, all this type of stuff. And if they're trying to create this new money revenue on how they can tax people by, what their damage is to the environment, supposedly by taxing it through carbon credits, they're of course going to have to try to instill that fear in people. So if weather is reacting the same, they're not going to be able to scare. They're going to be able to scare a certain portion of people, but the majority of people aren't going to fall in line with it if they're like, no, I don't see any difference. But if it's drastically getting hotter all of a sudden, then everybody's going to say, oh no, maybe it is climate change. Maybe we should be a little bit more conscious of this. So, like I said, it can be perceived two ways, but I think it's the kick up recently. And again, I don't know if it's all over the country, if it's just in Michigan in particular recently, but it seems like it's to try to instill the whole idea about the whole carbon tax thing they've been talking about for the past 2 years now, probably even longer than that, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. And actually, there's a section at the end of my book. If it's okay, I'd like to read it for you. It deals basically with that theory about climate change and them manipulating the weather in order to make people afraid of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this is from the end of my book, Conspiracy Crew. The end is meow. It's available now. All right. We've won the battle, but not the war, Mr. He said. The elites now know trucks can be used against them, so they will likely come for the trucks. But how? Doesn't North America depend upon trucks? Misty said. Yes, so it will be done slowly. Tommy and I think they will use global warming as an excuse to take the vehicles off the road. They will say the truck's carbon emissions are going to warm and flood the earth. Oh? Moira nodded, amping up her tablet and showing them pictures they'd taken inside a barn in northern Washington. The animals gasped. That looks bad, Misty frowned. What is it? A direct energy weapon, Lord Slorp said. They'll use it to alter the weather, start fires, and destroy the food supply, making the normies afraid of global warming. They can't control the weather, Misty yelled, then blinked as second thoughts entered her brain. Wait, can they? Silence. Then Rocky and Bonnie looked at each other. Bonnie nodded at the Labrador, and he stepped into the middle of the group. God sometimes reincarnates war dogs, he said. Our souls are hard to make, even for him. Most of you know about my time in Iraq, but before that I served in Vietnam. Anyway, toward the end of the war, the U.S. was losing, so they devised a plan to flood the Ho Chi Minh Trail with rain via cloud seeding from airplanes. This trail was an important supply route for the communists, and we've all seen how critical supply is to an army. This plan was called Operation Popeye. It didn't win the war for the U.S., but it did extend Vietnam's rainy season by 5 months. Rocky looked down at his paws. If they could do that kind of thing in the 60s, what can they do now? Can burn very earth, darling, said a voice with a heavy Russian accent. A beautiful white cat stepped from behind Lord Slorp's captain's chair. Darushka, Chester exclaimed, I missed you. What are you doing here? I contact alien friend to pick me up, darling. Come with warning. A Russian, Rocky growled, moving toward the cat. Chester quickly stepped between Rocky and Darushka. Exactly. The Russians have been spying on us for years. If the U.S. government is up to no good, they would know. He is more than that, darling, Darushka sighed, batting long eyelashes over her emerald eyes. Long time ago, the U.S. saved Mother Russia from communism. It's time Mother Russia returns favor. And so that's just kind of leading into the next book. But that's the end of Conspiracy Crew. The end is meow. Basically, what it's saying is that global warming is kind of an excuse to push everyone into communism. And that's the theory. And I'm going to take that a little further in the next book.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $2 a month. That's less than a bag of chips, and it's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in bonus content, merch store discounts, premium video versions of the show, along with some other perks, then you guys can become a member of the OMM family today. Or you guys can give it a try with a 7-day free trial. The link for that is available down in the show notes. Now let's get back into it. I said I'd love to continue kind of going down the avenue as far as this theory goes, because it's definitely something that I guess a lot of different shows and stuff have been talking about for a while. And even with like the whole push for like smart cars, I mean, with that push, not only are you able to control the supply and demand of things, but you're also able to control people as a whole, because once you start scaring people into the aspect of like, oh, you need to use electric cars, now you can scare people into, oh, now you can only drive this car at this specific time, or you can only drive this car if you do this. So it goes into, it's one of those typical things that you do it step by step, but it starts stretching out into covering a bigger basis of things. And once you get people to a point where now you can only travel so far, now you can only go so far, now you only need supplies that are this close to you, you just keep tightening that constraint until it gets to a point where people aren't able to move. But half the time it's like people don't realize what's happening until the hands are already around their throat.
Yeah, it's also the frog in the boiling pot. Mm-hmm. You know, you slowly turn the water up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's, I mean, basically I wrote that to kind of warn people. I don't know how many people have been warned, but hopefully enough. So who knows?
Say it's one of those things that, you know, if people aren't aware of things now, especially after, you know, the thing what happened a couple of years ago, like, I don't know if people are ever going to fully become aware of these things. Like, I feel like the biggest one was, you know, your government's lying to you as far as all that goes. And then the next step after that people are starting to realize seems to be the geoengineering, and it seems to be this whole like fluoride concept. So, you know, like it has to go the same way on the opposite direction, meaning that for us to actually start being able to make a difference, it's not going to be this instant overnight thing. It's going to slowly be a step-by-step thing to start making people aware of everything. So, you know, if people are able to slowly start exposing things like geoengineering, for example, you know, it's going to start opening up the doorway to a lot of other avenues for people. And, you know, maybe, you know, they don't believe that the media is lying to them currently, but as soon as they realize that geoengineering's been happening, then maybe the next step after that is that they'll start realizing that all of these mainstream news channels are all getting their information from the same place. And more often than not, you can play them over top of each other, and they're clearly getting the narrative from the same person, same paperwork, same everything. Like, they use the same key phrases, they use the same key everything.
Yeah. So in my book, the animals use the term New World Order, or sometimes rich jerks, to describe who controls everything. And at one point, they actually take all of their humans' TVs and burn them because the glowing boxes, as they call them, are sending their humans the wrong messages. So anyway, yeah, I stopped watching TV probably right around the same time COVID happened. I was like, okay, something is really, really wrong here. And, you know, if you look at how the people who were raised on TV, like really raised on TV and just watched it their whole life religiously, how they think compared to some of the younger generations that are kind of backing away from it, maybe just doing stuff like this or doing more tabletop games or things like that, they're backed away from it. You compare those people to like the boomers, they're completely different in how they think. So is there some programming in the glowing boxes? Definitely, I think so. And we have to be very careful of it and very aware of it.
I mean, even just like mental manipulation on a whole other level that people don't even realize. I mean, just watching TV shows, like you may be watching your favorite show, but you may not realize that there's symbology or certain things that'll make you feel a different way in the background. Like, you know, just a prime one that I've been watching recently, and I'm sure a lot of people have been watching, Squid Game. You know, the whole concept behind that definitely seems like an elitist concept, that it's almost trying to normalize the concept as a whole, because, you know, people, when they watch a show like that, like you mentally put yourself in that situation of what would I do in this situation? So you're already starting to rationalize what you would do if you were put in these situations. So one, there's already programming off of that. But one of the particular scenes that I was talking about, I'm watching the most recent season, and they have a part where they're wearing like all suits and everything, and they remove all the beds because most of the players and everything have died at this point. And they have this weird weird mural on the back wall where it's like this checkerboard floor, but it's done 3-dimensionally and it's mirrored of itself. And then it has crosses that look like they're representing the players, but it's like mirrored. And I'm looking at this and I'm just like, well, obviously this is supposed to be something symbolic. It's definitely something that has to do with some Freemason concept. Like, I was either trying to understand if it was supposed to be talking about the like mirror duality concept, because it was basically saying that like for so much good, it will inevitably turn into so much evil, you know, that people will become inevitably corrupted no matter how good they are, that they'll turn into the absolute evil version of themselves. Or on the other side, if they're just trying to show like the flip morals of people when they're putting in this particular situation. And, you know, the whole like black and white checkerboard idea is straight Freemasonry to begin with. And then the inverted aspect of the crosses being on it, like, it's one of those things that it's like, if you know what you're looking for, you know what to look for. But even if you don't know exactly what it means, if you're just aware of the fact that there's programming and things, like you'll see something just super simple like that the average person would probably just look over completely. And you'll just look at it and say, like, why does that make me feel like weirdly uncomfortable? Like there's something to that. Like, why are they specifically putting that there? Like that was never there before, and now it's in this scene and it's just nonchalant in the background. But that's the scariest part, though, right, is even if you're aware of it, you still see it and you're like, all right, I can't place what this is, but it makes me uncomfortable. For people that are just completely oblivious to this stuff, like you'll watch this stuff and in a subconscious level, like who knows what exactly it could be doing to program you. Like, you know, it's the images that flash in the background that you have to be more worried about than the actual images that are flashing directly in front of your eyes, because the stuff in the background is what hits you subconsciously, which is where the real programming is happening.
Right, yeah. I agree with you. In fact, the animals, like I said, they use the cat videos and the subliminal messages in my book to get people to act the right way. So it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. Have you heard of I'm sure you've heard of the theory of predictive programming. You've heard of that? Oh, yeah, absolutely. We talk about it all the time on the show. Yeah. Yeah. So supposedly, according to the cabal's beliefs, you have to let people know what you're going to do to them before you do it in some way or other. There are a lot of people that think that The Simpsons is one of those avenues that they put what they're going to do in The Simpsons because so many of the things on that have come true. But there's other ways that they've let us know too. So it's interesting. And so it makes you think like, okay, you know, I don't want to watch TV, but at the same time, what could they be putting out there that I could be looking for? So I don't know. I don't know what's the right answer.
I say, and then even on the other side of it, I feel like not a lot of people give credit to Futurama, for example, because I feel like it's one of those things that when it was originally aired back in like the early 2000s, people weren't connecting it with this like tech future. But now it's getting to the point where like our technology is starting to catch up with some of these concepts that are, you know, that are portrayed in Futurama. And I feel like that's going to be one of those ones that people are going to start rewatching some of those old episodes and going like, all right, there's something weird here. Like one that I was watching recently talking about like predictive programming and mind control. Yeah, there's an episode where Fry goes to sleep and he starts seeing advertisements for like underwear in his sleep, and he's just like, "Oh, that's super weird." And then the people that are already in the future, they're like, "Oh yeah, you know, that's normal. That they advertise in our sleeps. They advertise in our dreams. Like that's just what they've been doing forever." And they're just like, "Okay, well that's a little weird." And then now you start looking into some of the modern technology they're working on, and they're supposedly working on this like helmet that'll be able to show people's dreams. And that seems like the next step is that it's going to start flipping into programming people's heads while they're sleeping. Because, you know, if you can view the image of what somebody's seeing in their head, how hard would it be to reverse that technology and start putting images into somebody's head directly while they're sleeping? Like, it's just another means of predictive programming that, you know, maybe as people start moving away from, I don't want to say moving away completely from like the TV age, but people start moving into more of like the tech future interactive age. Like it doesn't seem like it's going to be any different. It's just going to be a different means of being able to do the same things. Like, you know, just because you're playing a virtual video game doesn't mean that the same predictive messages that were put in a TV show aren't going to be just now put into that.
Right. Yeah. So along that line, I know that they are actually using some brain chips for people who suffer from severe seizures. So, of course, that's a good use for a technology like that, but it's not too much of a step for someone who's, a power junkie to take that and do what you said they would do with it, put certain thoughts in someone's brain or control them outright like a puppet. Have you ever seen the movie Get Out?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That's almost like that. Wild stuff. But yeah, I put nothing past these people. I think that evil is definitely in the world. And unless you really start tempering it's going to take over. So we do have to be aware.
I mean, every power is inevitably going to end up becoming corrupt. And like you were kind of mentioning, with some of the positive aspects to some of this high-tech brain connection technology type stuff, I mean, there's obviously definitely a positive side to it. But on the flip side of it, somebody has the best positive intentions. They put this thing into somebody's body to be able to hopefully help with epilepsy, for example, or maybe make it so that they have a prosthetic limb that they can now function normally through like using their brain. But how long is it before somebody figures out how to hack that? That's unrelated to that company as a whole, and they start doing things like ransom programs where it's like, your arm isn't going to work unless you pay this money, or you're now temporarily brain dead unless somebody from your family pays this money. Like, that's my biggest fear when it comes to that stuff, is not necessarily the people creating it. I don't think that's the problem. Like, everybody wants to point fingers at the companies that are creating these things. I think that, of course there are going to be people that have bad intentions within those companies, but I feel like the majority of those companies have good intentions. But the problem is the people afterwards that figure out how to manipulate those programs. And as we've seen from the beginning of the tech age, any piece of technology that comes out, it's only a matter of time before somebody figures out how to hack that, and that's when the next generation needs to come out. So when you have something that's planted into your head, there's only so many updates you can do to the technology itself through Wi-Fi before you have to do something to like the physical board or something like that. So, that's right. My biggest fear is that somebody will be able to figure out how to hack into these things, and it's only a matter of time until they're able to do that and start creating ransomware or viruses or some variation of that.
Yeah. It's opens a lot of scary doors, that's for sure. So,
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show. So, kind of diving back into your books a little bit, just for the sake of it, since we were covering, Islam for the first half of it, diving into a little bit for the second half. We're almost towards the end of the hour, but if you want to get into another conspiratorial concept, another one that maybe you introduce into the book, I'd love to get into it.
Yeah. So, I mean, since we talked about Islam, I can read a little bit from Tales of American Idiocy. I wrote an Orwellian allegory about Middle Eastern immigration into the basically Western countries. It's called The Camel Refugees of Horse Ranch, and it's from this book here, Tales of American Idiocy. Again,
love the cat artwork, by the way.
Oh, you like that?
Yeah.
So Bosch Fawston did that. Are you familiar with Bosch?
I don't think so.
Okay. So he basically won the Draw Muhammad contest in Garland, Texas. This was in 2015. And he drew a picture of Muhammad coming at someone with a sword saying, "You can't draw me." And then you kind of see the artist's hand and him kind of talking. And the artist says, "That's why I draw you." And so he drew the illustration here, and he actually did the illustration too for this here. So did a good job.
Love the story though. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So and let's see. I'll show you another picture of Chester really quick before we. So Chester, this is, I don't know if you can see. Okay, there we are. Today's conspiracy theorist is tomorrow's prophet.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, so that's and that's where he came from, and that was Conspiracy Cat was the first book he was in. So, all right, well, let me get to Camel Refugees of Horse Ranch. Okay, here we go. And this, again, allegory for Islam in Western countries. Okay, You can't coexist with animals who want to kill you, Luca the German Shepherd exclaimed, slamming her artificial leg against the barn floor. This caused a layer of dust to fall from the whitewashed roof and a boom to echo through the wooden rafters of the animals' barn. The obnoxious gesture also startled all the animals of Horse Ranch into silence. This was quite the feat, considering that until then the debate over accepting a camel refugee family had been quite lively. All eyes then focused on Luca, each wearing a different expression. The horses, the most plentiful animal at the ranch, blamed awkwardly before resuming their work on converting animal stalls to voting polls. They didn't like confrontation, nor did they understand what Luca was talking about. The sheep stamped casually, then showed their behinds to Luca. They didn't have an opinion one way or the other, at least not yet. They were still feeling out the crowd. The donkeys, Demi and Crate, were openly sneering and disgusted. Not at what Luca said, although they certainly weren't fans of it. They were more disgusted with Luca in general, but this was nothing new. They'd hated Luca for years. Tex the steer snorted skeptically. Like Tex, the other steers knew what Luca was talking about. They just didn't want to believe it. Officially, they shared political power with the donkeys at Horse Ranch, but rarely did anything of consequence, effectively letting the donkeys run the place. The only animals taking Luca seriously were the pigs, whose IQ was a few points above the others, but whose numbers were the fewest. Their eyes were attentive, their snouts pursed thoughtfully. Mother Sow, Luca's best friend, stared politely while her piglet Junior played at her feet. Luca was grateful for the attention, even if mostly negative. As you all know, I have personal experience with camels. Some of the camels are good, but many want to kill us. It's too hard to know which camels are which. Therefore, I recommend accepting none. Demi sneered condescendingly. Luca, what a narrow-minded thing to say. Oh, it's more than narrow-minded, Crate interjected. It's downright speciesist. The word was like a bomb, like the Molotov cocktails Luca saw thrown at the troops overseas. It drew a stunned gasp from the animals. Eyes may have been on Luca before, but they absolutely bored into her now. There was something odd about the word speciesist. Some dark magic it possessed to turn those accused of it guilty without evidence. It worked its magic just then. And most looked at Luca with shock and disgust. After all, a speciesist was the worst thing an animal could be. Worse even than being dead. And that's just the beginning of the story. And so I don't know if you caught all the little references there, but Demi and Crate represent the Democrats and Tex the Steer represents the Republicans. And it's like they both suck and kind of do nothing and don't listen to the common people. And then, of course, speciesist is a reference for racist. You just shout it at people when you want them to shut up and you can't come up with a good argument against them. So
no, this is definitely one of those things that's also coming full storm again as a different wave where, you know, back in 2001, it was, you know, everybody hate the Middle Eastern people that were in the area. But now it's coming into this whole idea where it gets into like the great replacement theory that people are talking about, where you're picking two of these cultures that don't necessarily blend and you're trying to mesh them together and then it's not working. So in turn, by trying to deal with that, you just call people racist because they don't want these other people in their country that don't really fit in culturally. So this is one of those matters that I think is always going to be this recurring thing, because through chaos, you're able to try to manipulate people even more because you can manipulate their emotions because they're already at a high point of tension. But on top of that, I mean, of course, there's the whole all different ideas about, I guess, what the whole premise of great replacement theory could be, where I don't know if you want to get into that, but essentially the whole idea about dwindling the numbers of like Western cultures, essentially. But I mean, I could definitely see it from both aspects, but you know, there is no logical reason, I think, why you'd want to blend in a culture that doesn't necessarily blend in with your culture regardless, because what ends up happening is you end up getting factions within that area. And coming from somebody who's from Michigan, you know, we have a really, really big congregation of people from the Middle East, bigger, I think, than anywhere else in the entire country, if I'm not mistaken. And I can tell you right now, it's a pretty hard dividing line where, you know, as soon as you pass into the areas where it's like all the Middle Eastern area, you know, you start seeing mosques, you start seeing, you know, people that are fully gowned up, everything. And it seems like there's a borderline there where it's like, you know, for the most part, you don't really see a bunch of like white people walking around in those areas, and then vice versa, you don't really see a lot of people that are fully in their, or fully whatever the particular term is for it, but fully dressed up, walking around in these other areas. Like, you know, you talk about this whole idea about the great melting pot, but it doesn't work like how people theorize that it works. What it ends up happening is you start creating these little tiny pockets within the area, and then within those pockets start fighting each other for cultural dominance of the area, and then you just get into this whole other idea about completely making it so the area is uninhabitable for anybody because there's just constant fighting. And again, you know, the constant fighting is how you end up getting control of people.
Yeah, but absolutely. And I mean, again, I got into this because I figured like little animal stories and Orwellian stories would make a point, like we said at the beginning of the conversation, better than just putting information out there. So yeah, I definitely hope you'll check out the book. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's wherever. I could even send you a e-copy if you want. Both books actually, because I have e-copies of both. But
I would love that, by the way.
So okay, I'll do that for you. I got your email, so I'll put that up there, and I'll put links and give you some pictures and things you can put on your show. But yeah, I wrote a blog piece not too long ago. I have a blog I post every 2 weeks, and the title was "People Are Equal, Cultures Are Not." And the basic premise of it is that, you know, there are certain cultures that do not mesh well. And even within Islam, I mean, you know, the Sunni and the Shia have been killing each other for since Islam began. And, you know, if you, depending upon how seriously they take their Sharia, if you're a woman and you go out with your face uncovered, I mean, you could get stoned. I could potentially get stoned. I mean, I know I would get stoned in certain areas of the Middle East for dressing like this, because my dress is actually not a Muslim woman's dress. It's a harem maiden's dress. It's the dress of a kafir slave or a non-Muslim slave. Another reason I dress like this is, you know, how all the women like to go out and they wear the handmaiden stuff and they scream about how Christianity is so horrible. Have you seen those women? And they're okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Even though there's no legalistic basis, nothing against Margaret Atwood's work, but it's complete. It's a book that has no basis in reality. I mean, it really doesn't. Christianity does not have the legalism or the law code necessary to support such a dystopian society, whereas Islam does. I think that we have a much greater likelihood of having a harem maiden's tale than a handmaiden's tale. So that's why another reason I dress like this, to kind of bring awareness. But yeah, you can get stoned. But yeah, people are equal. God loves all people, but there are some cultures out there that just are not equal to ours. And Islam is one of them. It just is. It's not equal to ours.
I like the way you word that, because that's usually where there's a lot of like tension when it comes to these topics, is that people just instantly assume that you're being a bigot when you're trying to compare these things. But I like the way that you word that. I haven't heard anybody word that particularly that way before, but that's definitely probably the best way to word it. Is, again, it's not that necessarily any person is bad, but it's just that certain cultures, like you said, just don't mesh, and some just aren't really comparable to others. And just to kind of bring back another reference that you said in your book, when you were talking about the camels, saying that, you know, it doesn't necessarily represent all of them, but because of the general idea, you kind of just have to keep all of them out as a whole. I mean, I definitely think that kind of fits this concept that, you know, just because somebody's from this culture doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to fit into that culture and bring that culture over. Right. But just as a general point of trying to preserve culture, it's best just to cut that off completely. And I really hate to relate this to the whole idea of like animal conservation, but it's honestly the best that I can possibly relate it to myself, that, you know, when people go and travel around the world. They want to experience different cultures. They want to see how different people live. But if we keep doing this blend in, melt in pot concept that everybody's trying to push, then eventually we're going to get to a point where there isn't any culture and everybody's just blended and nobody really has any nationality. Like, they don't feel any connection to where they're from anymore. And when you get to that point, then it just completely turns into like chaos. And in order to completely eliminate that, it's almost like you kind of have to do the conservation concept that it's like, all right, this particular area is just for this group, this particular area is just for this group. And I know that coming from an American perspective, that sounds really bad, but you know, it's only because it's coming from an American perspective. Because in Japan, for example, like they have some sacred areas where it's specifically only for the Japanese people and they won't let tourists go into this area. And that doesn't get shunned upon. But if we did the same thing in the US, then it would get shunned upon. Like, people need to start kind of understanding the concept that, you know, if you want to actually learn and you want to actually experience these cultures, at a certain point, we're going to have to start finding a way to conserve and preserve them. If you keep blending them, they're just going to get to a point of non-existence where, you know, you may still have the key components of these cultures, but it'll almost be kind of like a lot of these like holiday traditions where it's so blended between so many different traditions that you can't differentiate where it came from exactly anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. I think the only reason that it sounds bad in the American mind is because the glowing boxes have told us that it's bad. Instinctually, you know, people do associate with like people. Okay. And, you know, some people call that, you know, racism or whatever. I don't necessarily believe it's racism. I think, you know, if you're comfortable with your own people, you're comfortable with your own people. I'm more comfortable with Christians than I am with, you know, people that are like hardline atheists. I'm more comfortable with, you know, people from the South that are a little bit more conservative than I am, you know, where I grew up in the Northwest. You know, it's just how humans are. And I actually feel bad for a lot of these immigrants because they don't have a connection to the land. I think a lot of them, you know, they have their families perhaps, but, you know, other than that, they're kind of all floating around. They don't belong. You know, we don't trust them for obvious reasons. And so it's a bad situation for them. It's a bad situation for us. And I think some of these NGOs that are pushing this need to be shut down, like yesterday. And we need a break from immigration. And some of these people that, you know, maybe were brought here that are not happy here need to be assisted back to maybe someplace where they can be happier. So that's what I think, anyway.
Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back with that deep conversation you crave. But just a quick reminder, if you might be interested in snagging some gear for this show, Bizarre Encounters, or any of your favorite creatures or topics, hop on over to the Open Minds Media merch store for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly, and t-shirts for the low price of $15.68 plus shipping. Check out the link to the store down in the show description. And now let's get back into it.
A lot of people like to talk about reparations. Most people are against it. I'm actually for it in a certain way. Okay, a very specific, very focused way. For the people that are not happy here, okay, they're just not happy here and they're not going to be happy here. Offer them a trip back to their African country of choice, along with, you know, paying for maybe 10,000 pounds worth of goods. Make it voluntary. If they want to go, they can. If they don't want to. But there's your reparations, you know. You know, that just kind of goes back to, you know, are you happy here or are you not? Because we have a certain culture, I think we have a right to preserve that culture. I think we have a right to peace. We have a right to our lives, and to have things the way we want them. And, you know, if these immigrants threaten that way of life, we have the right to push back. And so, you know, a peaceful solution would be to offer those people who don't like our way of life a way home. So, and cap this immigration for at least 25 years. Let everything settle out.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with that, because it's one of those things that, again, everybody talks about this whole melting pot concept, but when that was originally being talked about, the whole idea was European cultures, which definitely can all blend together. And even getting into what you were kind of mentioning with like the reparations thing, and hopefully this doesn't come off as an overall ignorant concept, because that's definitely not how I mean it by any means, but
No.
you know, coming from somebody that doesn't have any lineage, family ties to anything that has to do with slavery, because I'm not trying to justify slavery by any means, but the people that are still claiming that they want reparations for their family being enslaved over 100, 200 years ago at this point, or not 200, maybe like 150 years ago or whatever at this point. First and foremost, like anybody that's alive now doesn't have any connection to these things. You know, we've eliminated the concept of, at least in the United States, we've eliminated the concept where, like, if your parent does something illegal and they go to jail, that if they die, their child has to serve the rest of that time. Like, that may be still used in other places in the world, but that's not used in America. So you kind of have to relate it to the same concept with this stuff. Just because somebody's great-great-great-grandfather did something doesn't mean that this person that's here now is responsible for the actions of what they did back in those days. But even on the other flip side of it, just looking at the general situation, and this kind of goes into like a cultural thing too, which is why I said hopefully it doesn't sound too bigoted or hypocritical. But, you know, it seems like as far as a matter of which cultures can blend together, like you have a lot of like the Asian cultures, specifically like China and Japan. And it seems like there's kind of a convergence with, for the most part, certain aspects of Western culture, because there's this mutual understanding of, I guess, respect, but also colonialization in a weird way. So it seems like a lot of the time people can come from Japan, people can come from the US, and they can kind of like co-blend together with each other, you know. And that being said, also, you know, it seems like for whatever reason, like African cultures and South American cultures seem to get along pretty well. And maybe it's just because of like how they've kind of existed in the world together. But even when they come to like, you know, the United States, for example, they kind of congregate somewhat together. But that being said, kind of full point of what I was trying to make, the people that want reparations for the things that have happened in the past, you know, if you were still in Africa, if these things never happened to your family, would you be in any better situation now? That being said, like, Look at Africa now. You think about like all the different people that get kidnapped regularly, all the people that get brought into slavery by their own people over there, all the people that are, you know, beaten to death, all the people that are raped to death over there, you know, and it's always just constant chaos in the majority of these regions over there, because it's very vast, it's very open, like there's not a lot of like action that can really stop these things. So living here, having your family line here, where you at least have somewhat of the safety of knowing that, you know, you're not going to have some guy or some group come through the middle of your town in the middle of the night and kill everybody and just burn the whole town down. It's like the situation would be better. Like, yes, you can be angry about the past, but think about if this didn't happen to you, like where you would be now. And even on the flip side, I always like to kind of point this out too, for anybody that thinks that, you know, white people, for example, were just like going over to Africa and snatching people up. You know, that wasn't the case. Like, as messed up as it sounds, what was happening over there was other tribes were kidnapping other tribes, and they were selling those people to these people that were running the slave trade for supplies, guns, food, ammo, like all this type of stuff. So it wasn't like there was people running around just kidnapping African tribes. Like, it was tribes doing this to other tribes and selling them off so that they could have more weapons to war again against other tribes. So it's like, it's part of history that they try to leave out, but like the situation wouldn't be any better. Like, you know, people just have to kind of deal with the current situation they're in now and realize that the past isn't going to change. Everybody that was responsible for this stuff is no longer responsible, and you're probably in the best place that you could possibly be right now, because if this never happened to your family line, like, you probably wouldn't be any better off over there.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I'm just saying that for some of the people that are really unhappy or whatever, that would be the only kind I would support if I were to ever support it. Just to, you know, get some of the people that are making trouble out of here, if nothing else.
Ain't that the truth?
But yeah, I mean, it would have to be something that would be mutually beneficial. So I would see that as mutually beneficial. But I agree with you. I mean, you know, it was blacks enslaving other blacks, and then the whites buying them as they went along the coast. And a lot of those ships too were Jewish as well. It wasn't just whites.
I was going to throw that component in too, but I didn't know if you want to go down that whole rabbit hole. But yeah, anywhere that there's money, there seems to always be a congregation of that group.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of the ships, I forget how many of them, the main ones running that were actually Jewish. So,
going into aspects of their religion too that people don't talk about, since we're mentioning Islam a bit earlier, the whole concept of goyim, that the whole reason why the Jewish people were able to make so much money was because they saw anybody that was not like them as goyim or like cattle. So they were able to do loans. They were able to make money off of people because Christians weren't able to make money off of other Christians doing loans. They could do it because they saw everybody else as goyim. And the same concept goes to the slave trade. The reason they were involved is because they saw them as goyim, so lower people as cattle, and they had no problem with their religion because they weren't equal to them. As far as their religion goes.
The goyim thing, absolutely. That is definitely some animals are more equal than others, or sort of concept, as our dear friend George Orwell would say. Now, the Islamic word for that is kafir. And then, of course, there's infidel, but infidel was more used to describe Christians and Jews. Kafir could mean any non-Muslim, so like an atheist or a Buddhist or anybody. So it's a bigger umbrella term than just infidel. So,
Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. Now back to the show. But I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end, and I would definitely love to have you come back on to be able to get into even more conspiracies. And hopefully, I'm assuming you're going to keep writing, so I'd love to hear more of the progression of your characters. But I always like to end the show with some words of wisdom. So if there was any words of wisdom you might want to bestow on the listeners today, what might it be?
Question everything and always read the enemy's books.
Ain't that the truth? That's something I mention all the time on the show, that people are scared to see the other side. Like, I'm always talking about this in the aspect of like exploring the darkness. Like, people are just blocked off. Like, I'm a Christian, I don't want to explore the darkness, but the best way to understand your enemy is to understand their philosophy. So just because you're reading their books doesn't mean that you're part of their religion, that you're part of their philosophy. It just means that you're trying to become aware of the other perspective. So this is definitely something I talk about all the time on the show. Don't be afraid to explore the dark, because then with more understanding, it doesn't become the dark anymore, and you'll be able to know how to deflect or how to go about some of these situations with a broader perspective of things.
Absolutely. In fact, I have an upcoming book called The Spirits of Suddenly that deals with that overarching theme of reading the enemy's books. So I'll definitely be keeping you updated on it. It just got sent to the publisher, so should be fun.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, as soon as that ends up coming out, we'll have to do another round, and we'll definitely get into it. And for anybody that may want to come and check out your books, possibly even want to contact you, maybe share some stories, possibly, where can people find you on the internet, and where can everybody find your books at?
So they're on Amazon. And again, the first one is Tales of American Idiocy. And then there's also Conspiracy Crew, The End is Meow. And I'm on Facebook, author P.R Infidel, and have an AI image of me as a harem maiden. I always dress as a harem maiden. It's a cosplay thing I do, as I explained. And then I'm on Gab at Proud Infidel, and you'll see Chester, my little icon on Gab. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram as the harem maiden, author PR Infidel, and on Pinterest. And I'm also on Twitter. So I'm always happy to have a conversation with people. So.
Well, I really appreciate you making the time to come on today. It was a really, really fun conversation, even though we, of course, covered some dark topics. But I'm really looking forward to next time you come on and being able to dive into your next book.
Absolutely. Just send me some dates. It should be out in the fall. So if you want to do it around that time or shortly after or whenever, I mean, I'm happy. This was really fun. And again, it's just so wonderful to talk to like-minded individuals. It just really is so great to, I mean, our tribe's out there, and every day I find another one, and I found you, and I'm like, oh, another one of my tribe. So it's just.
Just keep expanding, keep making it so we have a bigger front. And one day, hopefully we'll be able to stand up and the chess game will just fall over for all these people that are controlling the masses.
Absolutely, 100%.
If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to show some love, I'd definitely appreciate it if you guys left a review or rating for the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any podcatcher you happen to use. Your continued support is what makes the show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. And if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, share it with a friend. Grassroots support from listeners like you guys is exactly how the show grows, so thank you. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the two that I'm the most active on. You guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form, which is available up at the top of the link tree. And the last way you guys can get a hold of me is through the hotline. You guys can either text or call that, whatever happens to be easier. And that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys didn't catch that, it is available down in the show notes. And if you guys got some free time, don't forget to go and check out our awesome friends of the community and our friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Sticker Mule, with some additional discounts and credits available. More information on that is also available down in those show notes. And every single thing that I mentioned throughout the show is all available off the link tree, which again is also available off those show notes. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune